I was 7 years old the first time I fed my baby brother a bottle at 3 in the morning, because our mother was passed out on the couch, and someone had to do it. I was 11 when I forged her signature on his school permission slips, because she never came home in time to sign them. I was 16 when I skipped my own junior prom to sit in a hospital waiting room, because he had a fever of 104, and I was the only one who showed up. I raised that boy, not our mother, me. And 18 years later, on the happiest day of my life, in front of 200 guests, he stood up, walked past me in my wedding dress, and put his arm around her instead. If you've ever poured your whole heart into someone, only to watch them choose the person who never showed up, stay with me. Because what happened after that walk down the aisle is something I never saw coming. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why I finally stopped waiting for an apology that was never going to come. My name is Claire. I was 26 years old, standing in a wedding dress I had saved 2 years to afford, thinking I had finally built the family I never had growing up. By the end of that day, I understood something nobody tells you. Sometimes the people you save don't become the people who show up for you. This is my story, and I need you to stay until the end, because what I did after that wedding surprised even me. I was 7 when my brother Ethan was born. I remember holding him in the hospital, this tiny, red-faced thing wrapped in a blue blanket, and thinking he was the most important person I would ever meet. I didn't know yet how right I was. I also didn't know how much it would cost me. Our mother Denise was not a bad person. I want to say that clearly, because for a long time I made excuses for her, and some part of me still wants to, but she was not present. She struggled with alcohol for most of my childhood, and when Ethan came along, something in her seemed to give up entirely. Maybe it was too much. Maybe 2 kids felt like a life sentence to a woman who never wanted this one. I don't know. I never got a real answer. What I do know is that by the time I was 9, I was the one waking up at 6 in the morning to get Ethan dressed for daycare. I was the one packing his lunches. I was the one who learned to microwave dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets because it was the only thing he'd eat without crying. Our father had left when I was 5, remarried, and started a new family 2 states away. He sent birthday cards, sometimes. So it was just us, me, a little girl playing house for real, and a baby who needed a mother more than he needed a sister. I want you to understand something. I never resented him. Not once. Not even when I was 14 and missing sleepovers because he had nightmares and only I could calm him down. Not when I was 16 and turning down a spot on the debate team because someone needed to pick him up from school every day at 3:15. I loved him with a fierceness that scared me sometimes. He was mine. I made him mine because nobody else was going to do it. By the time Ethan was in middle school, our mother had gotten sober, technically. She stopped drinking, mostly. But she never came back. Not really. She'd show up for a birthday, take some pictures, post them online with captions about my babies, and disappear again for months. I was the one at every parent-teacher conference. I was the one who taught him to drive. I was the one who sat with him in the school counselor's office when he told me, at 15, that he sometimes wondered if his own mother even liked him. I told him she loved him in her own way. I told him that because I needed it to be true, and because I needed him to have some version of a mother that didn't feel like abandonment. I never told him the truth, which was that I had stopped expecting anything from her a long time ago. I had built a wall around that particular wound and never let anyone, including myself, look too closely at it. By the time Ethan graduated high school, I had put myself through college working 2 jobs, started a career in marketing, and met a man named David who made me believe, for the first time in my life, that I could put something down, that someone else could help carry the weight. I said yes when David proposed, and the very first thing I thought, the very first person I pictured standing next to me on that day, was Ethan, not our mother, Ethan. Because in every way that mattered, he was the family I had built, not the family I was born into. I asked him to walk me down the aisle. For a year, Ethan and I planned pieces of that wedding together. He helped me pick the venue. He came dress shopping and sat outside the fitting room, giving me a thumbs up or a wrinkled nose through the curtain. He wrote a speech, he told me, though he wouldn't let me read it. He said it was going to make me cry, and he wanted to save it. Denise was invited. Of course she was invited. She was my mother, and despite everything, I still had this small, stubborn hope buried somewhere that she might show up differently for this one day. She RSVP'd yes almost immediately, which surprised me. She even offered to help with flowers, which she never followed through on, which also didn't surprise me. About 6 weeks before the wedding, I noticed something shifting. Ethan started answering my texts a little slower. He'd cancel plans to help Mom with something. When I asked what, he was vague. I told myself it was pre-wedding stress, that he was probably nervous about his speech, or overwhelmed being 23 and suddenly the man of honor in his sister's life. I didn't push. That was my first mistake. I had spent 18 years making space for that boy, and I told myself that meant I owed him a little space back, no questions asked. I had no idea what was actually happening behind my back. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found out that our mother had been meeting Ethan for dinner every single week that entire spring. Not casual coffee, sit-down dinners, sometimes for hours, at a restaurant across town. He hadn't told me. Not once in 6 months of planning together did he mention a single one of those dinners. I asked him about it, and he got strange, defensive. He said, "It's not a big deal, Claire. She's my mom too." I remember standing in my kitchen holding my phone, feeling something cold settle in my chest that I couldn't name yet. Because he was right. She was his mom too. But she hadn't earned the version of mom that meant secret dinners and private conversations he wasn't ready to share with me. I had earned that. I had earned 18 years of it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid, that of course a 23-year-old man was allowed to have dinner with his mother without reporting back to his sister. I had no idea those dinners were about to change everything. And 2 weeks later, standing in a small room at the back of my own wedding venue, I would find out exactly what they had been planning behind my back. The morning of my wedding, I stood in a small room at the back of the venue in my dress, my hands shaking, and I waited for Ethan to come get me. He was supposed to walk me down that aisle. We had rehearsed it. We had a joke about it, that he'd probably trip over his own dress shoes and take me down with him. He knocked on the door at 3:47 in the afternoon. I remember the time because I looked at the clock right before I opened it, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment I've been imagining since I was a little girl standing in a kitchen making dinosaur nuggets for a baby who wasn't mine to raise, but who I raised anyway. He looked nervous. He looked like he hadn't slept. He told me that Mom had asked him, the night before, if she could walk with him instead, that she'd cried, that she'd told him this was her only chance to feel like a real mother in front of everyone, that she knew she'd failed us, and that if he loved her, he'd give her this one moment. And he told me he'd said yes. He stood there in his tuxedo, in the room where I had gotten ready with my bridesmaids just an hour before, and he told me that on my wedding day, he had chosen her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not then. I just felt something inside me go very, very quiet. The way a house goes quiet after a storm has already done all the damage it's going to do. I asked him one question. I asked him, "Who fed you when you were 3 years old and she didn't come home?" He didn't answer. He just looked at the floor. I want to tell you I made a scene. I want to tell you I refused to let it happen. That I pulled rank as the person who had actually raised him and demanded my due. I didn't. I let him walk with her. I walked myself down that aisle alone, in front of 200 people, past every relative and friend who had watched me raise that boy from the time I was in elementary school. I smiled, because it was my wedding day, and because some stubborn part of me still believed that dignity mattered more than the wound in my chest. But something shifted in me that day. Something that had been bending for 18 years finally, quietly, broke. At the reception, Ethan found me. He said he was sorry, that he didn't realize how it would look, that he just wanted to give her a chance. I told him I understood wanting to give her a chance. I told him I had given her chances for 18 years, every single one of them at my own expense, and that I didn't have any left to give. I told him something else too. I told him that love isn't a debt you pay to the person who showed up loudest at the end. It's a debt you pay to the person who never left in the first place. He didn't have a response to that. It's been almost 2 years since that day. Ethan and I still talk, but it's different now. Careful, polite, in a way that breaks my heart, because we used to be anything but careful with each other. Denise still calls him more than she calls me, and I've made my peace with that, mostly because I've stopped needing anything from either of them to feel whole. David held my hand through all of it. He tells me, on the hard days, that the 7-year-old girl who fed a baby a bottle at 3 in the morning doesn't need anyone's permission to know what she did was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. I still love my brother. I probably always will, in the complicated, exhausted way you love someone you built with your own 2 hands. But I learned something that day I walked down the aisle alone that I wish I'd learned years earlier. You cannot make someone see the truth of what you did for them. You can only decide how much more of yourself you're willing to give away, waiting for them to notice. I stopped waiting, and for the first time in my life, that quiet in my chest doesn't feel like loss anymore. It feels like peace. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever given everything to someone only to be the one left standing alone, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed, because there are so many more women's stories still waiting to be told.